Welcome to Swiftuality, where we meet at the intersection of Taylor Swift and spirituality.
We're your hosts. I'm Megan.
And I'm Hannah. I am ready. All right. Welcome back to our podcast. And today we have another guest episode, and I'm so excited about this one. So this is our first guest that neither of us know, and Megan met this person on TikTok. Megan, why don't you tell us a little bit about how this friendship started?
Yes. So welcome, Ruby. Say hi, Ruby.
Hi. First Australian on the pod. Sorry,
Yes.
my accent's really jarring.
No, people are going to love it. I already know.
I know. I love it.
Yeah. So Ruby and I met on TikTok, and I think we both started our TikToks around the same time. And Ruby, you had a video go viral. Like, was it your first video you posted on TikTok?
It was the first video I ever uploaded, and it's the only one I ever intended on uploading. Mm-hmm. So I only put it on TikTok because all of my other social media is private. Mm-hmm. And I was posting all of my responses to the Tortured Poets department on Instagram, and I had some friends that wanted to share my thoughts with their friends, but I didn't want to add everyone on Instagram, so I thought they asked me to do an essay originally, and that was entirely too much work. So I started recording TikToks, and I posted one on, I think it was like the Monday afternoon after it came up, and by the time I woke up in the morning, it had like over 100,000 views.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy.
And my phone was almost exploding because they were either people loved it or people hated it, and I still get hate comments on it like very regularly.
Oh my gosh. And explain to us what the video was about.
Yeah,
just
what
very
was the
briefly.
content?
The video was a very, very short summation of a theory that I had that the Tortured Poets department wasn't autobiographical and was a parallel between the relationship between Ted Hughes and Sylvia Plath, specifically after their separation and Sylvia's death. So the Fortnite music video, in my opinion, because people are still going to be mad at me, it features a couple of things that made me believe that. So originally it was the Mondays in an Endless February, and Sylvia Plath died on a Monday in February by suicide. There was, the first thing that made me think it was actually, I hadn't watched the music video, but the Spotify video backing to the album cover and the song was papers flying around and fire, and there were a few recorded incidents between Sylvia and Ted where they would destroy each other's work, and that is also featured in the introduction to the restored version of Ariel, which is Sylvia's last poetry collection that was put out by her daughter, because the original version that was published was by Ted Hughes, and he'd edited it quite heavily and left some things out. And there's a quote from her daughter that said, there was an incident of alleged domestic violence between the two, and the daughter is on record as saying, my mother destroyed what she knew my father valued the most, his typescripts, and there was a history of both of them kind of destroying each other's work, whether it was about the other or because they just wanted to get back at them or do something and jeopardize their artistic output, because they were both poets. And there has kind of long been a parallel between Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn and Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes, because Sylvia was American.
He's British. Yeah.
And Ted Hughes was British, and he always viewed himself as the more serious, more legitimate artist, kind of the brooding bad boy. She was a bit younger and a bit more of a party girl, and I think that has been something that people have seen for quite some time. But I found the elements that were based in the facts of her life too close for it to be a coincidence.
That's so fascinating. And I, just watching your videos on TikTok, Ruby, I don't know much about Sylvia Plath, but I have like come to know more through your TikTok, which is Modern Idiot, by the way. Go follow. And yeah, just, I don't know, all the parallels are so fascinating. And I think the first time I interacted on a video of yours was you kind of saying that art is supposed to make you think, and it doesn't have to just have one meaning. Like, there could be so many different meanings to things, and you can make connections, and like, that's fun. It doesn't have to be quote unquote right or the accurate thing.
So the reason that it went viral, and I'm very confident in saying this is the reason, is that I had attempted to record that video a few times, but it was very hard to get my thoughts into a succinct format. And so the version that actually got posted is very short, and it was kind of me being exasperated with how long-winded what I was trying to say was. And I started it with, the Tortured Poets Department is not about Maddie Healy, it's not about Travis Kelce, and it's not even entirely about Joe Alwyn. And that is where all of the comments came from that got it so much attention, was just people screaming at me that I was wrong.
Yeah.
And I have posted in the comments since and in follow-ups that I didn't say that none of the album was about any of those people, or that you couldn't make an argument that it was about any of those people, but it wasn't something that I ever intended people to see, really, beyond the audience that had actually asked for it. And so I've had to make so many follow-ups since, because people, I think, especially with Taylor Swift, but also more broadly with musicians at the moment, have such a personal connection to lyrics and meaning, and people have said as much when I've kind of gotten into conversations with people in the comments of a couple of things that I've posted, that they feel personally attacked when you disagree with their interpretation of something. And to me, that is bonkers in the most diplomatic way possible, because it's like when you think about being in English in high school and that meme about sometimes the curtains are just red. Sure, maybe the author didn't have a deeper meaning in mind when they wrote it. Maybe it was a coincidence, but maybe it still contributes to the broader meaning of the artwork. And even though they weren't consciously aware of it at the time, looking back on it, they can go, oh yeah, that's actually a really good point that you've tied that into what's happening elsewhere in the work. But people seem to think, I think also when you have someone with as strong of a parasocial relationship with their fans as Taylor has, people feel like you disagreeing or just having a different opinion on what something means that you're telling someone that they're not allowed to enjoy something, they're not allowed to connect with it, they're not allowed to apply it in a specific way. And that is holding a lot of people back from, in this situation, becoming aware of other artists that they might enjoy. And in this case, especially considering that Taylor is on record as saying that she is a fan of both Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes and some other artists that I've posted about there being parallels with, it's holding you back from actually getting to know more about her as an artist and a person by connecting to the art that matters to her in the same way as her art matters to you.
Right.
But people are so obsessed with the relationship aspect and the gossip of it all, that attempting to make it about anything deeper, you either get people saying that you're reaching so hard you're going to hurt a muscle, or that you're being ridiculous, or that you're projecting, or that you're trying to tell them that they're stupid for not getting it.
Yeah.
And I've never intended for any of that to be the case. I'm just posting stuff that I think is really interesting. And through that, I've connected with you and also with a bunch of other people that have their own artists that they know a lot about and have posted about the parallels there. So there's the connection with the Beatles, which Taylor herself has spoken about.
Yes. Oh, I love those.
There's also the connection with F. Scott Fitzgerald and also Zelda Fitzgerald, which is his wife. And I've seen some videos coming out recently about Frankenstein and about some other things that, even if they are not intentional, the way that people present their arguments is still teaching you about something. So I don't really see why people are so upset about it, but they are very vocally against it.
Yeah. And even just hearing you say those names, I'm like, oh, I can think of examples just off the top of my head. But also what you're saying makes me think about, just from coming from my own context, about the way people defend the Bible too.
Yes.
And like, it's almost religious sounding the way that people will defend Taylor Swift. But it's fascinating to me because when I think about the Bible, I think about it, oh, this is this person's worldview. And I'm like, what's at stake for you?
I think that's why it has become such a thing recently, because pop culture is filling a vacuum in creating meaning for people and connection that religion and spirituality have historically. So people have kind of gone away from it, but I can't remember the quote, but it said, there's a reason we invented God. And it's basically that human beings, for as long as they have existed, in whatever form they have existed, have had some sort of belief system arise in the loose societal structures that have existed over time to create meaning and to create a common sense of reality. And without a higher power for that, we've kind of deified celebrities in a way that is good in some ways, but I think on the whole is quite dangerous, because quite similarly to religion, there is always going to be an element of fanaticism. And when people that are going to be the most vocal about something are the most fanatical about it, it's kind of the criticism that people have of the Swiftie community more broadly, which makes me really sad, which is that it's so exclusive and exclusionary and not welcoming to people that have just gotten into it, which hasn't been my experience at all. I mean, I've been interested in it for quite a while, but just dipping my toe into creating content about it, everyone's been in the community has been quite welcoming, except for the people that only want to talk about it from a pop culture, relationship, gossip perspective. And it is because they view it is their central belief system. It's something that they've oriented their lives around, and it's filling a gap for them that they probably don't have. Like, I posted a few videos basically saying like anti-intellectualism and all of these other things about having this knee-jerk negative reaction to people saying things that you do not at first blush agree with. And basically said, you can say whatever you would like about me. I just don't need you to say it to me, because I don't think people realize that in TikTok, you can't turn off comments in terms of notifications. So every single thing that gets posted on a TikTok, even if it's 100,000 comments, you're getting notified about every single one. You can't mute it. You can't say, this video is old and I don't care anymore. This conversation's become completely unproductive. I would like to be excluded from this narrative. All you can do is either turn the comments off completely or delete the video.
Oh my god.
And so I was originally saying, you can say whatever you would like about me. You just don't have to say it to me. But people don't have conversations outside of these social media apps that they can talk about this. And so it is, if I'm feeling generous, I'm interpreting it as like a bid for connection, and people want to have a conversation. But then when it gets unproductive and nasty and that you can't engage with people because you're not in a shared sense of reality, you just kind of have to take a step back and be like, we're on two different planets here and I wish you the best, but I'm stepping back from this conversation.
Which is, you need to do that for sure. We also, I will say about this, the celebrity is God, we do have a episode idea coming for you, and Ruby, we might need to have you back on because I love your thoughts on this, but we have also noticed some similarities, and I think it's a very rich discussion. But Ruby, for our time today, would you just tell us a little bit about you? What should we know about you, your background, your work, your TikTok?
I will give the abridged version. So I actually made a video about this. I'm not a Sylvia Plath expert. I'm not an English major, because I didn't know that was a meme and everyone was commenting on my video and I was like, are they calling me annoying? But it turns out that it's something that Taylor Swift said to someone.
Aww.
I am actually normally a technology lawyer, but for the past, I think it's almost 7 months now, have been a full-time rare disease patient. So I had a condition called Superior Mesenteric Artery Syndrome, which is an abdominal vascular compression that basically crushes your intestines so you can't eat. And it is exactly as painful as it sounds. So I was in hospital quite a bit, and then I lost my job, and then I was back home and was splitting my time between researching treatment options, because I was told by the doctors in Australia that basically, terribly sad, there's nothing more we can do, when they had tried approximately nothing, which was not great, and trying desperately to distract myself with anything. And I've been a long-term fan of Taylor, and then when the Tortured Poets department came out, like I mentioned, was doing first reactions on my Instagram story. And then when the TikTok did quite well, that just became my new hyperfixation to kind of take my mind off of it, because I was stuck at home. I didn't have any nutrition because I'd had a feeding tube, but something had gone wrong and they'd removed it. And so I physically couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't really have a lot of people come over because my immune system was so bad.
Yeah, it was during COVID, right?
Yeah, and I didn't have the energy to do anything. And it was pretty incredible how much energy kind of engaging in these kinds of conversations and also accessing this part of my brain that I hadn't really used since high school or early university, because law school, not famously interpretive. And so I credit getting involved with making content around this and the conversations I've been having with people and the friendships that I've made with really, really helping me recover, because it gave me a broader sense of like hope almost, and just kind of a reminder that there is so much out there that isn't ferrying myself between hospitals and my couch. That's how I got started.
What was your diagnosis process like? Because you do have a diagnosis now, right?
Yes. So this is actually my second brush with incredibly serious and rare illnesses. I had previously had median arcuate ligament syndrome, and that diagnostic process was very difficult. It took over a year to get an official diagnosis, and that actually involved me sending my scans to a specialist in Connecticut from where I lived in Sydney. I had to FedEx a CD to get him to diagnose it, because someone else in Australia had it, and sadly she had passed away, and we actually kind of kismet had mutual friends, and I was very sick, and they reached out and said, I've just read what happened to her. Her family started a charity. It's called Taylor's Vision, TAYLAHS, and they said, this sounds like you. And I looked at it and said, there's absolutely no way I have this, and then looked into it a bit more, and one of my doctors brought it up, and it turned out that is what I had. And I was lucky enough to find a surgeon that would operate on that. So I got surgery. I got sick in January of 2020, and I got surgery in April of 2021 and made a full recovery, which is almost miraculous with that condition.
Wow.
And I then was completely fine. I went back to my normal life. I went back to work. I went on a I survived trip. I went around the UK and Ireland, and that was great.
Fun.
Oh, amazing.
And I kind of got back and was working and started to feel a little bit sick, but because of my experience with how difficult getting a diagnosis had been, and I'd also had a lot of experience with doctors telling me either it's all in your head, or I actually had one doctor say, sometimes these things just happen, I'll make a referral to palliative care. Because we can't just keep doing tests. And I basically said, what do you mean you can't keep doing tests, but you can put a 25-year-old in palliative care? That seems absurd. And I'm very thankful that I didn't listen to that, because I did end up being fine. But when I started to get sick again, I started having what I kept telling everyone was not pain. I was very, very adamant that I was not in pain. I was having abdominal discomfort. And I finally went to the doctor after a couple of months and thought it was potentially something to do with the surgery. So there can be side effects from having that kind of, it's so rarely done that it's effectively experimental surgery. And there are a couple of side effects that I was aware of, and my doctors tested those and said, no, it's probably something else. We'll just keep doing tests. And I went from being very adamant that I was not in pain to being in so much pain that I had to go to the emergency room within about a month. And I presented to the emergency room in November thinking, oh, this will just be an easy, quick way to get all of the tests done, figure it out, I'll be home in a couple of days. And thankfully, I ran into a doctor that was aware of these conditions and ran a test for something that people would never ordinarily test for unless it was the absolute last chance. Like, because this is a diagnosis of exclusion, basically. So everything else is negative, so it might be this, let's do the test. But they did it pretty much first. And it's so rarely done that the radiographer doing the ultrasound was talking to me during it and how he wasn't super confident with doing it because he doesn't do it very often, and he read out the numbers to me, and I know the procedure because I'd looked into it when I'd had mals, and I knew what he was saying was telling me that I had Superior Mesenteric Artery Syndrome, and that was absolutely terrifying. And it took a few days because the report had to be written by a hyper specialist in vascular compressions to confirm the diagnosis. And that almost worked against me because I had that diagnosis. That's what they were treating. But I've said the entire time, this isn't how it started. I was sick before this, and then these symptoms developed and have gotten worse. And I'd actually been tested for SMAS in March of 2023, and I didn't have it. And so I kept saying to them, we need to figure out how I went from not having it to having it in 6 months when really nothing had changed. And no one would do that, because they basically looked at the diagnosis, and it is quite a serious diagnosis. The reported mortality rate is commonly known as 33%. That is an overstatement, but it was very hard to get doctors to not view it as... Also, 33% isn't 100%, so I'm not sure why they were so fatalistic about it. But my doctors were effectively like, that's terribly sad. There's nothing to be done.
Because what happens when you have that is you said your intestines just kind of like collapse onto each other, so you can't digest any food. You
can't get food through, so you can either get a blockage or you can suffer an arterial dissection because of the pressure in the area. Normally, effectively, you starve to death. So the treatment is weight gain, and if that doesn't work, there are some surgeries, but the only surgery that Australia is currently doing or at least that's what my doctors told me at the time, is very hit or miss and very traumatic. And given I'd already had an abdominal surgery, they didn't recommend it. So they basically looked at the options and said, oh, well, kind of neither of these is working. So too bad. You should go to America. And not even a specific doctor, just you should go to America.
Wow.
There's probably someone there.
Like, figure it out yourself.
Yeah. And thankfully I didn't listen to that. So I went on the hunt for other doctors in Australia, and I found some in South Australia, and I'm from Sydney. And I traveled there to get some further testing done, and that was helpful in that it excluded some more things, but didn't give me any definitive answers. And then miraculously, I went back to a dietitian that I had seen when I was 16, 17, and she picked up that it sounded like I was having trouble with my blood sugar. And it turns out after all of this and all of the trauma and all of the trips and all of the months in hospitals, it turned out that I basically just have an excess of insulin. And the funny thing is, when I originally went to the doctor, I said, I think it's something to do with my pancreas based on where the pain was, and the symptoms I was having were coming on as soon as I ate. But the tests that they ran for that weren't relevant to blood sugar, they were relevant to enzymes. And so she referred me to an endocrinologist that ran some other tests. And yeah, by controlling my blood sugar, I've been able to put on some weight. I no longer fall asleep as soon as I eat anything, which is great. I can eat solid food again, which is incredible. And also by taking some medication, because what ended up happening was, without blood sugar, my body was using adrenaline to survive. So it caused some serious thyroid problems, and that is what had put me at the point, not to get exceptionally morbid, and I'm fine. I always feel the need to stress that when I'm talking about this, because I don't want people to freak out. I was very close to not being here, because the stress that running on adrenaline was putting on my heart and my adrenal system more broadly meant I couldn't sleep. My resting heart rate was in the 130s.
Jeez.
I was constantly dehydrated. My blood tests were showing that there was kidney issues and potential liver issues. And I was starving to death, effectively. And the solution to that was just eat different food and take a couple of different medications. And so within a month, I went from feeling pretty confident that I wasn't making it to the end of 2024 to being completely fine.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
What a roller coaster.
Roller coaster, yeah.
So, and how many months passed? You said November of 2023 is when you went to the emergency room. And,
So the Sydney-based doctors gave up in March or April. And I went to Adelaide at the end of May. So right after my 30th birthday. And then I started seeing the dietitian in, I think it was July or late June. Late June,
Yeah.
I'm curious, because I feel like it's such a will thing to like hear doctors say there's nothing, like there's no options here. What is it in you? Because I feel like it just takes whatever it is that's in you to be like, I'm not gonna take this, and like find your own way, because like that's gotta be exhausting. There's no lead from this, I gotta go find my own way. And I don't know.
What was your like mental space during that time? What was going on for you?
It was, so the first time it happened when I had Mel's, it was kind of a radical acceptance of, okay, yes, this might kill me. Like, if I can't get treatment, I will not make it out of this, but also I'm only going to be okay with that if I know I have done everything I could possibly do, and that was still the outcome. Like, if I continue kind of Sisyphean running up this hill and it doesn't work, at least I know I tried. And I think I credit that to, I had a lot of struggles with my mental health as a teenager, and I kind of had to make a decision to come out of that. I kind of made a decision, and I actually remember making it, basically going, we've been doing this for a while, this isn't working. What if there's more than this? And kind of the other side of it was, what if I try and there's nothing more than this? And I said, at least I tried. And in this case, when it came to Mel's, it was, I know I can pass away from this. I've just watched someone, like I'm watching their family go through losing them. I have the benefit of that experience insofar as I can make sure that I don't make the same choices, or I can take the parts of the choices that they made that got them closer to the goal. And I kind of have this story of caution to stay away from things that might cause issues. And then I got better and everything was perfectly fine. And so when it happened the second time, it was just kind of like, here we go again. And I also just I've had such a good life in between getting sick the first time and getting sick the second time that I just wasn't done.
Yeah.
Like it's that cliche of I didn't come this far to just come this far. I didn't fight that hard to just get 2 years. And if I could do that much in 2 years, imagine how much I could do with the rest of my life. Because I think it would have been quite natural to be really, really angry. But when I started getting sick again and I was talking to the people around me about that it might be something quite serious, which it became obvious within a couple of weeks of actually seeking medical help that it was going to turn out to be something quite bad. I said, whatever happens, I won't regret going through what I went through the first time, because my life for the past 2 years has meant more to me than my life before I got sick the first time, because I valued it so much more. I used to be such a neurotic, self-involved, anxious person, and I'm a better person now, not in a like I'm closer to a higher power or anything like that, just that truly nothing's that deep. I have the best friends a person could possibly ask for. There's so much stuff that I enjoy doing. And so when I got sick, it was kind of like, here we go again, but also I know that I can do this. I know that if I believed it when people told me to give up, I wouldn't be here now, so why would I believe you this time?
Yeah.
And I also just knew, given that it is, so SMAS affects, they think, about 0.01% of people. Like it's not a big number. Or it's 0.13% or something. It's very small. It's less than 1%. And because it is so rare, there isn't a lot of research into it. There's not a lot of advocacy around it. And there's not a lot of education for medical staff. And so by becoming an expert in it myself, I knew more about it than the people that I was paying to tell me about it. And I also knew that they weren't seeing the same things that I was seeing, in that I was in Facebook groups with other patients. I was talking to people. I did a media interview and I had people reach out to me as a result of that, where this idea that it was a death sentence just wasn't accurate. And so I just wasn't willing to act like it was until everything had been exhausted. And I think where I got the energy to do that was panic. It was, I'm racing against the clock here, kind of if I stop and give myself a break, I'm not going to have the energy to get back up. So I'll just keep running.
Yeah, that's so fair.
And so fascinating that your body was literally running on adrenaline during that time too. It's like, oh,
man.
I can just feel the anxiety.
Yeah. And I know the Eras tour fit into this timeline.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Of you, between all the diagnoses,
Yeah, tell us your Swiftie story too, how you got into Taylor Swift, what she's meant to you.
I first got into Taylor Swift's music when I was very young. When I was about 14, my sister downloaded her songs off LimeWire. Some of the songs that still haven't come out, that are still sitting in a vault somewhere.
They better be on debut, Taylor's version.
I know.
Yeah.
And so we would listen to them like driving home from school, and I loved that. And then I was kind of always liked her music and found it very nostalgic, and Speak Now meant a lot to me going through my first heartbreak.
Aww.
But then I got really into her more broadly and the music industry when I was in law school. I originally thought I was going to be a music lawyer. And I was in entertainment law, and our professor gave the Taylor Swift is the music industry speech, and it was all about the letter that she'd written to Apple Music about compensating artists for streaming, and how she did her exclusivity deals and how they controlled the supply chain to make sure that her records didn't leak before the release date. And I kind of recognized that I'd bought into the very misogynistic media narrative that she was just singing about boys, and it kind of wasn't that deep. And I was like, I think this person has actually either herself or created a team and hired very well to attack the music industry in a way that no one else is doing. And even though it was deeply uncool, given that I was into all of the indie music at the time, I started following it more closely. And then that's kind of come to fruition in that there's been the collaborations with Bon Iver, and there's been Folklore and Evermore, and that is kind of my taste in music. And then with the re-records, I've had the experience to have all of the songs that I listened to when I was a teenager and kind of relating them to, they remind you of what you felt when you were a teenager. And thank God we no longer love 15-year-olds, because we wouldn't survive it. But then there's also the vault tracks and there's all of the things that come out, and it's so fun. And
it's so fun.
Having friends that are into it too and chatting to other people, I feel sorry for people that aren't into it or don't have something like this, because I think looking back on your life and realizing how far you've come since the first time you've heard something isn't really an experience that many people get to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so obsessed with hearing adult Taylor sing the songs.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's something so haunting about hearing her as an adult, because it's like, oh, I'm an adult now too. But like then replaying these memories, I don't know, that gets me very emotional.
Yeah. And so I bought tickets to the Eras tour in a complete panic in the VIP pre-sale that I vowed I wasn't going to, because I looked at the packages and I was like, why would anyone pay this much money? This is absurd.
Me.
And then I was like, I knew I was done for, because I logged into, my best friend lives in Melbourne, so I was going to go to the one in Melbourne because she has a daughter and she couldn't bring her. She's too young. We kept it a secret and she found out recently and it was a whole thing. She's turning 4 in a couple of months.
Oh,
she's very,
you
very
kept
young.
it from her. Oh.
Yes. So I logged in and I was like, oh, I'll just see if I can even get to the point I can purchase tickets. And then as I was like fighting for my life, I actually went back and looked at the text recently, and I was messaging my friend and I was like, but what if this is the only chance? Like, what if I have to buy them now? And she was like, look, I can't afford them. And I was like, I'll just buy both. It's fine.
Aww.
Because I was also in the midst of a breakup. Like it was still happening. And so my resistance to impulse purchases was at an all-time low, and I also felt like I deserved it. So
you did.
When I got in and I got the opportunity to buy tickets, I bought them, and I immediately was like, I don't regret this at all.
Yeah.
Because obviously then the general sale went up and people were trying to get tickets, and I tried to get tickets in the general sale for a friend of mine and I couldn't get them, and so after that I just felt completely fine about the amount of money that I'd spent. But I went to the Melbourne show, which is in February, so I was in hospital getting told I needed a feeding tube, and one of the first things I said was, can I still go to the Eras tour? It's in February. And they're like, oh, well, you only need it for 3 months. So I would have gotten it out, if I'd gotten it out at 3 months, I would have gotten it out like the day before I was meant to fly to Melbourne. And I was like, oh yeah, perfect. Like I can survive anything
This
as
is
long
all
as I
gonna
can
work
go
out.
to this.
Yeah.
And then that didn't end up happening. I ended up back in hospital, I think 3 or 4 times in between. And every time I went into hospital, I would just say to my nurses that, bless their hearts, would just be like, oh, she's back. I would just say to them, I'm still going. Like, I don't care if I have to discharge myself AMA. I am going to the Eras tour. And so I ended up going. I was connected to feeds 22 hours a day. So I had to take like the feeding pump backpack and everything with me. And it was, my best friend was basically my bodyguard. Thankfully, Australia floor seats were seats, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do it. But even like getting into and getting out of the stadium and having something hanging out of your nose and attached to a backpack, it was a bit touch and go. So she was like defensive linebackering people out of the way.
What a great friend.
I think she was more stressed than I was, but yeah, 1,000% worth it. And I think
Where were your seats?
front of stage right, so I think they were like B reserve.
Okay.
So like super close to the back of the stage, so where like the man setup is. And anti-hero, she was like on our side of the stage, which was great.
Beautiful.
That's awesome. Yeah,
it was great. I think having that on the horizon as well helped me get through everything that was going on, because I was just constantly like, I don't have the opportunity to kind of throw a hissy fit and fall apart and kind of gather myself and come back in 2 weeks when I feel mentally prepared to, get another tube shoved all the way through my intestines while I'm fully conscious. I was just constantly like, we've just got to get to the Eras tour, and after the Eras tour, we can fall apart if we have to. And thankfully, that worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it like getting to that moment? Like seeing her in the flesh, as I said.
I need someone to do a psychological study on why you cry when that intro music starts. Because I saw it online and I was like, I don't think I'm going to cry. But then it started and I could not stop crying. Yeah, it felt surreal. It still kind of does. I don't have the Eras tour amnesia that I've heard some people talk about. Like, I definitely remember that I went. And thank God, because otherwise that would have been a lot of money for nothing. But it did feel, even while I was there, I was like, oh, this is something that I get to say for the rest of my life that I actually saw in person. Like, the gravity of it is really significant. And I do feel so bad for people that haven't had the opportunity to go. Because it is kind of a once in a lifetime thing.
It is.
And it was so nice. Everyone was so lovely. Bracelet trading and just chatting to people around us. But I had a bit of the experience where when you are visibly disabled in that way, there's a lot of pity. And I found that, like, originally I was like, oh, that's very sweet. But then I was I said to my friend, I really wish people would stop treating me like a Make-A-Wish kid. Like, I bought these tickets with my own money. I'm just here to enjoy the music. I don't need you to perform doing a good deed so that you can be like... So it was like, for example, the confetti, and then the confetti comes out and there wasn't a lot of it. So people are trying to get it, and then everyone was trying to give me theirs, and I just didn't want it. Like, I'm just not interested in it. I didn't have any use for it. And people wouldn't take no for an answer. And I was like, I genuinely don't want this.
You're like, I'm going to throw this away.
Yeah, and then I was very conscious and kind of paranoid about, like, I didn't want to end up in a TikTok. I didn't want to be that, you know, those kind of people filming the crowd and like, maybe it's nice that like you've captured a nice moment, but like I'm literally fighting for my life here. I don't want to be content right now. I just want to enjoy my time with my best friend. I don't want to be in the background of anyone's videos and like have that turn into a whole thing. So that kind of put a bit of a dampener on it, but it was definitely worth it.
Yeah. My other question, and this can lead into the song you're gonna kind of share with us, but what were your surprise songs?
Yes, my surprise songs were This Is Me Trying and the mashup that broke everyone's brains, including mine, which was Getaway Car, August, and The Other Side of the Door.
Oh my god.
So people have said that there was a mashup before that, but I mustn't have seen it because someone midway through when she shifted songs started screaming, "What is happening?" And it was funny experiencing in real life a phenomena that I've seen some people talk about when you're singing the song but you don't know what you're singing.
Yes.
Because it's so much kind of stimuli going into your brain at the same time. But yeah, it was incredible.
So amazing. Those are really elite surprise songs.
Yeah.
It was to make up for playing You're On Your Own Kid for the first time the day before.
Yeah, I will never stop talking about this. Then the day after my concert, she played Death by a Thousand Cuts and You're On Your Own Kid, which are my top 2 songs.
Oh, wait, no, it wasn't. Oh, what was the Vault track on Midnights that came out afterwards that is like the heartbreak anthem of all time? You're Losing Me.
You're Losing Me.
She played You're Losing Me the night before and I was devastated. I watched it on a live stream with my glittery cowboy hat on in my hotel room. And I was like, man down. Like, they've hit the Pentagon. We've lost it.
Like, you are losing me now. Yeah.
I was devastated. And then when she did This Is Me Trying, I was like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
You've made up for it. You've redeemed yourself.
Yeah. So This Is Me Trying, this song in particular has meant something to you.
Yeah, so this came out, the first time I listened to this song was in an Uber to pick up the keys to my first solo apartment.
Like the Uber was playing the song?
So, no, I was listening to it through AirPods because my real estate where I had to collect the keys from was genuinely 45 minutes away from where I was living at the time. Yeah, so I had time to listen to the entire album like twice.
Amazing.
And I remember
the Uber driver
feeling...
did not want to listen? You weren't like,
No.
Where's the aux?
I think he was on a phone call. They usually are.
Oh my gosh.
How unaware.
And I found it really interesting when I first listened to it because it's kind of like the gifted kid burnout anthem. But it's funny that this exists and then there are still people that think that all of Taylor Swift's music is autobiographical because like I got wasted like all my potential. Oh yeah, because Taylor Swift hasn't lived up to her potential.
Yeah. There she goes, yeah.
Famously rusty wheels, like underwhelming. And so I connected with it really strongly because it kind of goes back to what I was saying about approaching very difficult health situations where there's not a lot of hope to rely on and just going, well, as long as I've done everything I can do and just feeling like This Is Me Trying is the line, at least I'm trying, like at least I'll be able to say that I've done everything I possibly can, and maybe it won't work, and maybe it's not pretty and it's really scary and it's expensive and maybe it's a complete waste of time, but at least I've tried. And I listened to this when I was in hospital in November, so when I got diagnosed with SMAS, I had a lot of the staff saying that like my positive outlook was incredible, and it's because one, the gravity of the situation hadn't really sunk in because at that stage, they weren't saying all hope is lost. They were saying, oh, there's this first line treatment and that'll work and you'll be 3 months and you'll be completely fine. So I believed it. And then I would have procedures that were very painful or tests and things like that. And I would allow myself the ability to wallow in my hospital bed with my headphones on for a couple of repeats of This Is Me Trying and fall apart completely. And then be like, okay, sad time is over, and just switch back to either distracting myself or doing research or like chatting to my friends and assuring everyone that everything was fine, and kind of like microdosing my sorrow in a way. And just kind of, I think it was also because of the nostalgia of the first time that I'd heard it, and I'd listened to it when I had mouths as well, and just kind of the sadness of I've been through this already, but also the comfort of I've beaten this before. Like at the end of the day, I know exactly what it feels like to feel like there is no hope, and also to get to the other side of it. So like, yes, it's unfortunate that we're like take twoing facing death, but we got the opportunity to do it, so there is always going to be hope. And it's just such a beautiful song.
It's so beautiful. It's amazing. I'm looking at the lyrics now. I just love like the first line, I've been having a hard time adjusting. It's like, always. Life is hard, and
every stage of it.
And like it is just constantly trying to adjust to whatever is being thrown at you. I think too, as a recovering perfectionist, having the line, this is me trying, at least I'm trying, is comforting to me, because it's like, I might not have it all figured out, or I might not have the answers, I might not have done it perfectly, but I'm still trying, and like that's good too, you know. I love that.
My soul's never related to the song. I don't know, like it's never like hit me the same way. But I think in her Long Pond documentary, she talks about like the song was talking about someone who's like maybe like suffering with addiction, and my brother was like going through, you know, just addiction and like just figuring out his life, and he's someone who's like has so much potential, is very talented in like music, and just things always come kind of easy for him, and then like just watching his life crumble. Like I think listening that song with that in mind, it just hits different for me, and it really, I feel like, helped me connect with other people. Man, like you don't know what's going on, and just like the very minimal that people are doing might be the best that they're doing. And like it's just perspective, and it's like her songs might not connect to people just personally, but I think it helps paint pictures and help like makes things easier to grasp these like very inner working of someone else's lives, and like you get to see it in this beautifully descriptive song, and I'm like, I get it now, or like at least I understand it better, or at least that helps me put myself in that position and like relate in that way. I think I cried listening to it with my brother in mind versus like just listening to it and I'm like, this is a great song, but just hits different.
I think in terms of the outlook on addiction, and also just the outlook on like self-destructive tendencies more broadly, the line, pull the car off the road to the lookout, could have followed my fears all the way down, and maybe I don't know what to say, but I'm here in the doorway. And then talking about like pouring whiskey and drinking and all of that other stuff, it gives an insight into, yes, I might be doing something self-destructive, I might be wallowing in self-pity, I might be ruminating or reminiscing about stuff that's not helpful, but I have made a conscious decision not to do the finite bad thing. So at least I'm trying. At least like I might still be making silly decisions and returning to situations that don't serve me or engaging in self-destructive behaviors, but at least I'm trying. And it's the hope of, as long as you're still here, it's not over. Everyone is on a journey. Everyone is developing coping skills. Everyone is learning their lessons, and there is always the opportunity for improvement as long as you are still here. And I think that is a message that's really important, especially when you, like you mentioned, perfectionism and feeling like this all or nothing attitude. And as someone with experience, because karma is hilarious, I had an eating disorder when I was young, and then I went on to develop 2 different conditions that meant that I couldn't eat.
Oh, wow.
So I spent like 10 years forcing myself to eat, and then my body was like, what if?
Oh my gosh.
But the thing that I learned going through recovery was that it's not linear and it's not perfect. And if you throw all of your toys out of the cot the second that something goes wrong, you will be in this loop forever. Whereas if you forgive yourself and keep moving forward and kind of acknowledge that, yes, you might have done something unhelpful or unhealthy, but maybe it's not as bad as the last time, or you didn't do it as much, or you didn't stay in that situation for as long as last time. Like, incremental improvement is still improvement. And I think this song, from that lens, has a lot to teach people about compassion for the people in their lives that they might be feeling like this has been going on forever, like kind of get over it or give up. And reframing that as, isn't it wonderful that this person is still standing up and trying?
Yeah.
They came to the doorway. You know, they didn't go somewhere else. They came. Thinking more about, sometimes it's what you don't do versus what you do.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Because like from outside looking out, sometimes I'm like, I'm not seeing the fight. I don't see that you're trying, but it's like, it doesn't look the way I want it to look, but they're still trying, and like understanding that.
Yeah, and that's the heartbreaking part of the, I just wanted you to know that this is me trying. Like, it's not just I'm trying, it's I need everyone around me to recognize that this is me trying. Like, me being here is me trying.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
And I love the line too, and it's hard to be at a party when I feel like an open wound. Where it's like, how does a wound heal? And it's just kind of like time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also like, I don't think anyone does vivid picture painting in quite so few words as Taylor Swift manages to, because once you've heard it, you're like, no, that makes perfect sense. I've had that feeling. But no one else would have put it like that.
Yeah. Like, why is it an open wound?
And it's also, it's hard to be at a party. It's not like I won't go to the party. I can't imagine going to a party. It's like, no, I went. It was just really difficult.
Yeah. I want to ask about like what spirituality means to you, if it means anything at all.
Yeah, so I've had a bit of a spiritual journey, and that there was kind of a waterfalling of Catholicism through my grandparents on both sides were quite religious, and then my parents were, I would say, culturally adherent, but not really invested. And then the layer below that is kind of, I think, most of us, if not all of us, like my generation in my family, are just not religious at all.
What is Australia like? What's the majority?
I would say it's majority culturally Christian. So Catholicism, Anglicanism, and different Christian religions and Abrahamic religions more generally. But I would say culturally conservative, but not particularly religious. Like, I don't think religious adherence and like attendance is that high, but everyone identifies as being religious, and it definitely has a big influence on our political scene. But personally, I was raised and went to Catholic schools, and then I didn't have a great experience just because I've been a cynic my entire life, and I've just always asked too many questions, and nothing loses the veracity of your argument like refusing to have it with a 7-year-old. So I kind of gave up on that early doors, and then unfortunately
more.
I got kicked out of class for asking too many questions about communion.
Like, they were like, you can't be in the room anymore.
They were genuinely like, they kept saying any questions, and I kept putting my hand up, and they were like, and then I can't even remember what it was, but I remember distinctly the feeling of being kicked out of the classroom and being sent outside and being like, oh, I've done something terribly wrong, but I don't understand what. Because I'm just asking questions. Like,
yeah, and you told me that I can.
Yeah, and I kind of have always butted heads with the very religious people in my life, just because everything to me was a curiosity, especially as a kid. And it's how I've ended up becoming an expert in so many weird things. It's like, once I get onto something, I can't let the string go. I've got to unravel the whole tapestry. And unfortunately, that meant that when I was in my teenage years, I went full like vocal atheist, Richard Dawkins, arguing with everyone. Everyone's an idiot. Nothing means anything. And thankfully, I've grown out of that. And now I have a lot of respect for people that do have religious beliefs. I would count myself as agnostic. There's definitely something going on, even if it is just the power of meaning making. I think it goes back to narrativization and also being invested in things and whatever it kind of takes to make you be good to other people, and whether that is an immediate reward or a belief that you're contributing to some greater karmic force or some greater like global energy even. I believe in being a good person, and I believe in doing things because it's the world I want to live in, rather than kind of the way I grew up was, you're doing this because if you don't do this, God will be mad at you. And I always found that kind of unhelpful, because I was like, if he didn't want me to do it, why did he give me the option? Yeah, you can get a sense of why I kept getting kicked out of class. I have a lot of friends that have varying spiritualities. As someone like in the queer community, there's a lot of like different ilks there, and people kind of ebb and flow through how attached they are to anything. I don't want to believe in astrology, but I am a Taurus and everything about me proves it. So
right.
Can't really argue with that.
Yeah.
I will say that like when I've been very sick, I've had a lot of experiences with people that have really reminded me why I stepped away from religion at quite a young age.
Yeah.
Like I had an Uber driver tell me that, because basically I was very ill, and then people would be like, well, you're going to get better, right? And I would be like, genuinely, I don't know. And like, I don't want to tell you and then have you be like, okay, problem solved. Like, I don't want to lie to people. I'm a really bad liar. And so I would say like, I'm not sure. And I had this Uber driver say, well, you have to pray. And I was like, oh yeah, well, you know, people can do that. And he was like, no, because you can only get a miracle from God, and you getting better would be a miracle. So if you don't get a miracle, it's because you didn't pray enough. And I was almost like, pull over, we're fighting. Like, this didn't happen to me because I didn't pray hard enough. This happened to me because something in my body internally moved 2 millimeters when it wasn't meant to. And then I had people I had the experience, I had a lot of people say things like, this shouldn't have happened to you. And I was like, what you're implying is that someone else deserved it, which is really messed up. Like, I can't think of anyone I'd like to nominate to transfer this to. And at the end of the day, I kind of think I'm uniquely qualified to approach this challenge. So maybe I am the best person for it to have happened to. If like the universe decided it had to happen to someone, I'm almost glad it was me, just because I wouldn't want it to happen to anyone else. And yeah, the perspective that other people had on it just made me really grateful that I have the belief system that I do, that kind of everything is random and what you do with it is what matters. Because I think if I had still a belief that there was some greater power that was making these decisions and deciding to put me through little tests, I'd be furious, and I would have like justifiable reason to be really, really upset. And I think not having to confront that actually made it easier. Just accepting the randomness of the universe and being like, all right, we're doing this again, is a lot easier than having to pass the belief that this awful thing is happening to you and someone meant it to happen. Which I've had people in my life go through terminal diagnosis of different things, and I've watched them have that experience. And some people, it kind of depends the specific situation that arises in, but some people can accept it and just say, this is my time, this is the decision that's been made. And some other people just get really, really angry, and that can take away from the time that you have left, and there's not a lot that can be done. Like, that's your reality, that's how you're feeling, that's how you're experiencing it, and no one can talk you out of it, and you have every right to feel that way. But in my experience, it was kind of like, yeah, this is horrifically unfair, but okay.
What was it like facing death in terms of spirituality?
Because I don't believe in the afterlife as such, I'm not completely invested till it fades to black and there's absolutely nothing. But I was more worried about the stuff I was going to miss. And that was the only time I ever got really upset, because I do like my life and I love the people in my life. And I've put so much time and effort and investment into making it something worth missing. And when I had to organize a will, and I had to organize a living will to make medical decisions in case I were to go into surgery and anything were to go wrong, and a power of attorney and all of that sort of stuff. And it was the kind of banality of all of that. I saw someone else on TikTok, her name's Megan, and she put up a post about a situation that she went through, and she said, grief is ridiculous because my whole universe fell apart and I still had to buy bananas.
Yeah.
And I went, yeah, that is exactly how I felt. Like, I have to go through all of this stuff, and I still have to make appointments and call my lawyer back and fill out paperwork and figure out how much this painting in my living room is worth. And it's just so ridiculous. But I think my perspective on there not being an afterlife that I can imagine has kept me focused on what I have here. And that is, like I mentioned, the only times that I really fell apart were when things were happening in the future, and especially when I got very sick. Like, Hosier tickets went on sale, and I love him. And as the nominated friend that can always get tickets, it was my job to buy them. But I was genuinely, and also I didn't have a job and I was running out of money, and I was like, do I buy tickets to this?
Yeah.
Like, am I going to be here? It's in November. And then I kind of said to myself, well, we bought Eras tickets and it kept us alive. So just for the sake of, I'm not sure what'll happen if I don't buy these, I'm going to buy them just in case.
Amazing.
But yeah, it was hard, but it was also, it helps you stay invested in what you have now. Confronting the potential of not being here anymore made me really grateful and intentional about what I do. So rather than, to give a perfect example, rather than staying and sitting on my couch, which doesn't get direct sunlight, and just kind of going, woe is me, making the effort to walk into my office and look out the back window where there's a gorgeous garden and there are kookaburras. I don't know if you guys are familiar with those cute Australian birds. You should Google it. They have a very funny, when they do a call, it sounds like a laugh. But there's actually one doing it right now. There's one of them that like hangs out on the washing line in my backyard. And like making the effort to just walk into this room and look for the bird and be like, yep, I saw something good today. Instead of just sitting there and being like, everything sucks and I'm gonna die and I'm mad at everyone and woe is me. I think I also, because I don't have a belief in the afterlife, I didn't worry about it being bad. Which was helpful. I was kind of like, best case, I get to see like my childhood dog. And like, worst case, nothing. But I did have a lot of, and this is so morbid, it's really hard to pick funeral songs. And I wanted a really good funeral song, and I didn't want a cliche one. And this is manipulative, but I wanted something that people were going to hear. I was like, no one is forgetting me. I've tried too hard. But yeah, I went through like everything, and then some were so heartbreaking that I was like, no, this isn't appropriate. I wouldn't do this to my friends.
I want to hear some. What were your options?
Well, the funny thing is, I did it the first, like when I went into mal surgery, because it was experimental, I had to sign something that said like, I might not be coming out of this. And I had done a living will in a way that if that surgery goes wrong, it goes catastrophically wrong. The margin for error is genuinely millimeters. And if it goes wrong, it is like they accidentally cut your aorta and you're done for. So I picked out songs, and the funny thing is, I remember picking them out and I don't remember what they were. So I told my friend at the time, who has my power of attorney, she doesn't remember them either. And then this time I'm pretty sure it was a Bon Iver song, but then when I was listening back, I was like, none of these work perfectly. Like, if you really listen to the lyrics, there's something a bit weird about using these for funeral music. And then this time I could never pick one. So maybe that's what kept me around. No one's released a good enough song yet.
Putting that out there.
Yeah, I'm going to be thinking about what my funeral song is going to be.
Right. That's going to be my fixation now.
Yeah. Taylor will write one eventually, I'm sure.
Yeah. Because there's Bigger Than the Whole Sky, but that doesn't really work.
No. Or like a mashup.
Mashup.
She'll do it.
Surprise songs portion of the funeral.
It's like the Eras tour. But like funeral version.
You're on Your Own Kid has to get featured because it shows up so much.
Of course.
Sorry, that's so dark.
No, I love it. But that's what gets you through these things, is dark humor. And just the absurdity of that we're all on a floating rock in space.
Yeah, precisely.
Maybe this can be our last question. I don't know, Ruby, if you have anything you want to shout from the mountaintops, please feel free to do so. But I was wondering, for people who maybe have a friend or family member who has a rare disease, like, what were the things that were helpful? You've talked a little bit about the things that were not helpful, like telling you to pray more. Don't do that, people.
Yeah.
What was helpful? What do you wish more people understood about what it was like for you?
I had the experience the first time I was very sick. I was during COVID lockdown, so I physically couldn't see people. And then when I could see people, it was like outdoors and a couple of meters apart. Like maybe we could get coffee and sit in a park or whatever. And I kind of had a bit of a narcissistic experience in that I was only focused on kind of what I was going through. And it wasn't until someone that I was dating, actually, I was telling the whole story. We met after I'd gotten better. And I was explaining it all. I was like, but it all turned out completely fine. And they said, oh, that must have been really hard on your loved ones. And I went, no, they were all dealing with it like remarkably well. And he went, were they? Or did they just sensibly not tell the person that was dying how upset they were? And I went, oh. And then I was catching up with one of my good friends that had actually like driven me to hospital a couple of times and just been incredible. And I asked her, I was like, hey, did you think I was going to die? And she just burst out crying. Aww. And I was like, oh, I missed that at the time, my bad. And she was like, no, I didn't want you to know. Like, it's not your job to manage everyone else's reaction. And so this time, it's awful that I've had practice at these things, but it has come in handy. This time I was more cognizant of telling people, especially people that didn't know me a couple of years ago when this happened for the first time. I understand that you must be upset and that everything in me and who I am as a person wants to comfort you. I can't right now. So please feel free. You can talk to each other. You can leave the hospital and go to lunch. You can do whatever. But while you're in here, it can be about your life or it can be about this situation and my reaction to this situation. But if everyone, now that I have an awareness of it, if everyone starts showing me how worried they are, I'm going to freak out. So I'm on Delulu Island. And if you shatter this illusion at all, you're off the island. Like, I can't have it. We just all need to be completely here together, being like, this is a weird side episode that's eventually going to turn out completely fine by the season finale. The show is not getting cancelled. We're going to be okay.
I love it.
So I think it's difficult because it's so hard to find other things to talk about, and people quite rightly think, I don't want to talk about day-to-day nonsense with you while you're lying in a hospital bed and you might die. But genuinely, the best thing you can do is gossip. The best thing you can do is tell a silly story that happened at work. Report to people. I know that it might feel like you're kind of rubbing it in, the things that they can't do, but mentioning that the world is still turning. And it kind of depends the mindset that the person is in, because that can be really hard to come to terms with when you feel left out. But it is also the reason that you have to survive is to get back into that. The thing that I struggled quite a lot with is, and I ended up having to do effectively a PSA. I had to put it on my social media where I put up, because I was giving people updates because things were changing so often and everyone needed the information, and I just didn't have the energy or the inclination to send 85 different texts every day. And I was getting people's emotional responses to updates, and I had to put up a post that said, I need you to understand that when you're reacting to these updates, you are not reacting to the news, you are reacting to me. So when you are getting angry that doctors are not doing enough, when you're confused because something has changed 180 degrees in the past 3 hours, when you're frustrated that this isn't moving quickly enough, when you're freaking out and you just need a yes or no answer and you just can't live in this grey area anymore, I need you to not do that to me, because as hard as it might be for you to be a party to it, it is happening to me. And I have no control over it. And when you're asking me to justify decisions that have been made that I have no control over, you are just reiterating what I'm already experiencing. And also just the experience of getting all of those messages. Like, you're saying it once, but I'm getting it 25 times. The best reaction that I had is, I have a group of girlfriends. We all used to live in the same building. It's the one I moved into during COVID. And the apartments are all really small. So it's effectively a dormitory.
That's amazing.
Because the apartments are so tiny that it's all young women living alone. And so one of the girls set up a group chat, and it's been 4 years now, and we all just caught up the other night. We went to dinner, and we still have the group chat, and we're still all really involved in each other's lives. And what they did, which I found out about later, they set up a separate group chat that I wasn't in, where it was, who's taking Ruby a coffee, who has the key to her apartment so we can go and get her shampoo for her, who's going to visit what days are we going to visit? So there's someone there every day and everyone doesn't come on Monday and then she's alone for the rest of the week. And I cried when I found out that existed, because I was like, these people know me so well that they knew that if they did it in the group chat, which I'm in, I'd be like, I'm fine.
Yeah, you'd be like, no.
It's cool. No, don't worry about me. It's all chill. Like, I'll see you guys when I get out of the hospital. You don't need to come.
Yeah.
And the fact that they realize that they all have their own very busy lives and they have jobs and pets and some of them have kids and like all of these other commitments, and they went, all together we can be the support system. And she's got enough going on, so let's figure this out between ourselves and then just give her the finished product. So I think what is ultimately unhelpful is either oversharing your own experience of the illness and the situation with the person, and also doing if there's anything I can do, because that's, I used to just say to people, do you know how to cure SMAS? No? All right, well then I don't know what to ask you for, because I don't need you to bring me food. I'm hooked up to an IV pole. I don't need, like, I have a friend that's already proactively picking up my keys and going to my flat and watering my plants, so I don't need to ask anyone to do that. And the people that I remained the closest with are the ones that took the time to say what is needed in this situation and what can I offer. And the people that wanted to be involved but didn't really want to put in any effort, but I got kind of the sense that they either felt morally obligated to participate or that just the spectacle of it all kind of attracted them to it and kind of made them project a closer friendship than we had, that are no longer involved, are the people that overpromised a bunch of stuff that I never even asked for and then would just like skip out, say that they were going to come to the hospital, and so I would kind of schedule other people around the times that they were going to say that they were going to come, and then just bail.
Weird.
And it's like, why did you offer? Because if you had just shown up, that would be great, but now I'm actually sitting here alone when someone else wanted to come at this time. And I would say take stock of what you can offer and what's realistic, because the impulse is always to offer the universe and just kind of do anything you can to make someone feel better, and actually make a sensible, realistic offer and then do it, and take as much stress as you can off the other person, because no one actually knows what's going to make them feel better in that situation until someone just does it.
That's very helpful advice. Thank you for sharing that. I hope that helps.
It's a really
someone
good
else.
question.
I mean, just as a chaplain, I'm thinking too, hearing like when you were talking about the responses to your texts of how you are the person holding all the emotional, like it's like, oh, I'm holding everyone else's emotions too, when that's like not helpful.
Everyone's yelling at me because my doctor's not doing anything. And I actually said in the post that I put up, I was like, none of you are dying. So actually none of you are capable of being more upset about this than I am. So unless you want to, and I welcome you to do it, come to the hospital and yell at them yourselves. Do not send this to me. Like, if you want to come and get tangibly involved, I welcome it. Otherwise, trust that as the person that argues for a living, I'm doing as much as I possibly can be. And I also know more about this. So when people are having the reaction of, what do you mean? This doesn't make sense. Yesterday they said this, that, and the other. I felt like people were implying that I wasn't doing enough, when in reality I was doing everything I possibly could, and also they weren't doing anything except yelling at me over text. So just keeping an eye on, even like, don't send all caps, don't send exclamation points, don't, like, have your reaction and then have your communication be separate from that reaction.
Like, take care of your own emotions first, and like exactly. Also, I see this all the time where people who are caring for other people in the hospital, they're not taking care of themselves, and it only negatively affects everyone. So like, take care of yourself, take care of your own emotional responses and reactions, because you can't pour from an empty cup, as they say. All right. Anything else?
If you have a medical problem, go to a doctor. It might take a while, but I can guarantee you that ignoring it never made it better. And if you go to a doctor that tells you that something is like fine, and this happens a lot, right? Like when I first got MALS, it was like, oh, it's COVID, everyone's anxious. And I was like, I can't eat. Like, if I eat, I throw up. That doesn't feel like anxiety. Doing your own research is important, but it's also really important to trust professionals. Like, getting second opinions is very valid. I think there's a danger of, I never want people to self-diagnose, and I never want people to kind of take their anxiety and run with it, but I definitely think that if you are capable and you have the introspection to realize, like, no, something is wrong, that is a feeling that you should trust and you should follow through on, because I think there's kind of two sides to a spectrum. One is the people that WebMD everything that's possibly wrong with them and believe the first thing it says, and the other side is me going, no, it's just discomfort, it's not pain, it's just sometimes I double over, it's just discomfort. This heat pack is purely for discomfort, it's not pain. And I have had someone else in my life that unfortunately has wound up with a terminal diagnosis because they consistently went to the doctor for something, and the doctor kept saying, that's fine, that's age, that's normal. And they actually had a scan done that showed a very serious problem, but the person looking at it just wasn't the right person looking at it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they just put their instinct to the side and said, I guess this is something I have to put up with. And years went past and their diagnosis is now terminal. So if you still have a feeling and you can afford it, obviously, it's obviously a very privileged position to be able to get second opinions, but your health is everything. So
For sure. Especially when you're young, I feel like it's easy to dismiss those things. I would do that if it's like, oh, this is just something I'm living with, because you don't think the worst, obviously.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. This was an
I still can't
amazing
believe that you
opportunity.
agreed to be on our podcast. Honestly, truly.
It's my first, it's my second podcast, but my first one was about my job. This one is about stuff that is a lot more important than that.
Truly. Thank you so much again for just sharing so openly, and it's an honor to hear your story.
It's been so great.
Yeah, just get to know you a little bit has been enjoyable.
Yeah.
Thank you for commenting on my TikTok. All of those months ago.
We desperately trying to grow our TikTok, which is not happening, but that's okay. One day.
We'll work
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks again, and follow Ruby on TikTok, Modern Idiot, and you can follow us too, I guess, if you want. And we also have an Instagram. I think that's it. Yeah.
Sweet.
All right.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ruby.
Thank you. Bye.